Space is cruel to the human body. We aren't machines. Rockets with metal skin and polymer bones, rovers with microchips for guts. Our bodies are full of fluid and soft tissue. We aren't built for space. Our thoughts, the things we know, are sturdier in zero gravity, but they originate in gray matter. They change shape, even disappear in the face of disorientation, dehydration, oxygen deprivation. Because ideas require bodies too, hands, lips, a tongue, ears. Otherwise, they're about as useful as dust motes drifting in the air. When I was 12 years old and watched test rockets spark through the sky outside my Aunt Regina's house, I imagined their destinations, perfectly round planets colored red and pink and white. I pictured spacesuits, puffy and bright against a black expanse. It didn't occur to me to think about the bodies inside those suits, the brains inside those helmets. Not until a frozen day in November when the news came that the Inquiry Explorer was in trouble. It was on a 6-year mission, the first of its kind, to travel farther in our solar system than any manned mission had gone before. Inquiry was special. More than a decade of research at the National Space Program had gone into building the Explorer, and it was manned by 4 of the most talented astronauts in the world. It was a Saturday, late morning. I sat in the window seat in the living room with a book on my lap, New History of Energy. A chapter was devoted to my uncle and his famous fuel cell. The book smelled like him, like metal shavings and pen ink. Since he'd died, I'd read the chapter at least 20 times. I turned a page. Outside, rockets launched from the NSP campus lit up the hard gray sky. The sound of the TV came from the living room. A man was talking about Inquiry. I went into the hallway to listen, and my limbs went cold. The Explorer had lost all propulsion control just as it was beginning its orbit around Saturn. The newscaster lowered his voice and began talking about the minutes leading up to when the Explorer lost power. He said its fuel cells were suspected, but that couldn't be right because my uncle had invented those cells. I moved closer, my stomach a heavy weight. He didn't say anything more about the cells. Instead, he talked about the Inquiry crew, and I grew impatient because I already knew everything about them. Where they grew up, how old they were, what they had studied in school, if they had siblings and how many, their hobbies and what they liked to read. I could tell you every detail. The newscaster began reading from a statement issued from NSP. They were in constant communication with Inquiry, it said, and were working around the clock to troubleshoot the suspected fuel cell malfunction. Inquiry had recently received an unmanned supply capsule, the second of 12 scheduled to reach it at 6-month intervals, and had ample food and water and an open line of communication with Earth. NSP was confident a solution was imminent. The crew were not in any immediate danger and had been in contact with their families. Then the man stopped talking about Inquiry, and the weather report came on. I returned to my spot in the window and called the dogs, Reacher and Duster, to come sit with me, but neither came. I felt chilled and stiff and pulled my sweater to my chin. The words in New History of Energy swam on the page. I got up, went into the kitchen, and opened the closet door. Inside was my aunt's new vacuum, a sleek silver machine with a nozzle like a 2-headed snake. I used a knife to disconnect the nozzle, take out the screws, and remove the plates and filters. When I lifted the motor's cover, the smell of dust and paper filled my nose. The fan inside was a perfect plastic flower, with curved gray petals and a small red center that made a soft clicking sound when I turned it with my finger, clockwise and then counterclockwise. I imagined that when the flower moved forward, I was turning time, that night was falling around me. Everyone was asleep, and there was no rush. I could look at all the parts of the vacuum and think about how they could be put together differently,